Yeah. Okay, let's go up.
Hi, this is Steph, and you're listening to WMHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting from New Haven, Connecticut.
Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Coral Ortiz has been making New Haven tick for 2 years now, and she hasn't even started college yet. Coral Monday night completed a 2-year term as a student member of the city's Board of Education. And she got a lot of love last night from grown-ups who usually fight with each other about everything else. We're going to talk about that. During her time, Coral has played a leading role in urging her elders to respect each other and keep the interests of kids in mind. She's in the WNHH studio today to reflect on that experience. Thanks to New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. And welcome to the studio, Coral. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I'm going to ask you to get so close to that mic, you're almost eating it.
Okay.
So I can hear every word you said.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Well, the pleasure is ours, because we've been watching you with much admiration about the role you have played the last 2 years. 2 years ago, New Haven switched to a hybrid Board of Education, as you know. I'm just filling my listeners in. It used to be completely appointed by the mayor. Now the public gets to vote 2 members. And people argue about whether that was good or bad, but I think the part we can all agree on that was good was it added a non-voting, although maybe it should be voting, student member as well. Kids get to elect 2 members to the board on staggered terms. And you were the first student from Hillhouse High School elected to serve in the Board of Ed. So you didn't get to vote, but otherwise you got to be at Board of Ed meetings just like any other member, sitting up there, hearing what's going on and participating in debates. So how was your last meeting last night?
It was nice to just reflect on my last two years. It was pretty peaceful. Just hearing everyone's positive words really made me happy, and just wanting to continue in public service when I go on to college.
So do you think that would have been different if you hadn't been on the board?
I think my idea of what politics looks like would have been different if I wasn't on the board, but I think I still would want to be a public servant. I just think my idea of what it looks like is a lot more realistic.
So tell me about that, your idea of what politics looks like. So what does politics look like to a graduating high school senior after serving 2 years on a very politicized Board of Education in your home city?
Well, yeah, I kind of thought going in that, like, these things that people say, certain things that are, like, in the movies, like, oh, that's not true, oh, everyone's, no one's doing any of these things, and that kind of was changed when I got on the New Haven Board of Education. I thought everyone was going to, not even on the board, but just from what I saw in, like, the public or in general, like, everyone was just want to do everything 100% for kids. And that sometimes whether it was, like, in other meetings or, like, in public comment or stuff like that, I saw that maybe that wasn't necessarily the case.
With that, when adults get involved in schools, they don't necessarily want only to help kids?
I feel like most people that I met actually really want to help kids. Like, central office members, some of the board members, I was just like, oh, wow, this is so inspiring to see people really dedicate their lives to kids. Seeing the superintendent, Reggie, like, we've talked, and he's just, people who've just dedicated their lives to helping kids. But then there have been other people in my life where at times questioned.
And are these like your fellow board members as well as people who stand up, let's say, and speak at the public meetings or who advocate for certain groups within the school system?
Yeah, just in general, like community individuals. I just feel like there have been times where some of the things that they say, I question whether or not and how that directly pertains to students' education.
Give me an example.
Uh,
You're not on the board anymore. You can say whatever you want. And actually, it's
I do
useful.
have to still stay in New Haven, so
Yeah, but so what? I mean, you stand for.
I mean,
for what you
when some adults are yelling at each other in a room, and right, and they're setting standards for students, about like maintaining proper conduct in the classroom, and then they're yelling at each other or throwing kind of shade, or I don't know what to even call it, or like direct like derogatory comments towards each other, like, and then they're telling students to behave in a certain manner. I don't think that's beneficial to the students. And I think at times it became so much about that rather than like the work itself, rather than like what's happening in New Haven, what's going on, how can we help students, and more about like you versus me, that just got away from like the task at hand.
So 2 years ago, you were finishing up as a sophomore in high school. You've now graduated. Congratulations. And you got onto the board. And when you came, what was your expectation when you were going to be what did you think was going to happen when you were going to be a member of the New Haven's Board of Education?
I mean, I honestly thought I was going to be able to just say these are all the things that are going wrong, and in this amount of time, this is how we're going to fix it, and this is just it, and it's done. And obviously, just whether it's anything that you can't change things that quickly. Like there's different things in place, and there's a kind of a reason for why things are the way they are. And I just expected to have it be very like, these are the problems, let's get it done, here we are. And I feel like a lot of the times there are still problems in New Haven, and we can continue working on them, but I just expected for them to like not be over, but like a lot of the problems that I wanted just to be completely fixed by the time I was out of it.
So you learned this lesson firsthand before all your fellow students in political science courses in college are going to learn it in the books, to realize that you think everyone just wants to solve a problem, and even if nobody's on the take, even if nobody's got too big an ego, even if they're not yelling at each other, it still takes longer to change things than you think it would, that there are reasons they were working the other way. Can you give me an example? Were you thinking particularly, let's say, about when you brought up the issues of how there isn't enough continuity in guidance counselors?
Yeah. I mean, for example, guidance counselors, like I don't think our guidance counselors, I think our counselors are like qualified. My counselors, I talk to them, they try to do the best that they can. Obviously the budget constraints, like you can only have so many counselors per students in New Haven, and I feel like that stops a lot of the times reaching out to every student and giving them
So
the
the
amount of
problem
time.
you identified, and you brought this to your colleagues on the board,
Mm-hmm.
is that not only aren't there enough guidance counselors, tell me if I have this right,
Mm-hmm.
to deal with all the students, try to help them get to college and get
Mm-hmm.
help their way through their academic career, but also they shift so often year
Yeah.
to year that lack of continuity was also holding people back. Is that the two facets of the problem you were concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, even with assistant principals, like sometimes I see that they're constantly shifting around, and I understand why they're, a school needs a certain thing, so you're going to shift this person around, but sometimes it's like there isn't that, continuous person for your 4 years, especially for guidance counselor. So when you get to that college application, if your guidance counselor isn't going to be able to give a sometimes they will, a thorough response, because they have so many students and they might have not known you for 4 years, which is very different than someone who has like a couple of students and has known their students for 4 years.
So what did you discover when you were dealing with this issue stood in the way of fixing it?
I think money a lot of the times stood in the way of fixing it, and like it's hard because there's so many schools and there's so many students. It's trying to figure out how to efficiently use your personnel like effectively, and I think it's finding that balance, and I think we're getting in the right direction, but I don't think we've quite found that balance.
So a lack of money would explain why there are too many students per counselor.
Yeah.
How about why we were churning through them so fast, or they get transferred so often? What lay at the root of that problem?
I think sometimes There's so many things. I think sometimes it's like this idea, I think someone said it the other night, it's idea of like you have to keep people fresh and like you have to keep people fresh and essentially like moving them around will keep them like fresh and happy. And I don't know, I feel like it just has to do with people thinking that like if I put this counselor here it'll be better, or no, this school now needs this issue so let's put a counselor here, and just like they think that by putting counselors, like switching counselors, it'll make every school equitable. But like you have to be continuous, you have to continue investing in the same person in the same school in order to see results. You can't just be like, oh, it's not working in a year, let me put someone else in.
So you say it's gotten better, it's getting better. What changed while you were on the board that saw this problem get addressed?
I think just bringing light to the issue, like just having people say this is an issue and we need to acknowledge it, really put a focus. And I know the directors are trying hard to get it done, and I think because there was this spotlight on this issue, like there's this extreme focus in guidance counseling now, which is just helping.
So partly it's just paying attention.
Yeah, it's paying attention
The
because I
people
feel
in charge are paying attention. They need some more continuity. They need to do something about guidance counselors having too many students.
yeah, because a lot of times I feel like a lot of things get swept under the rug because you're not paying attention. So especially in such a big district, 22,000 kids. I mean, it's so easy to not to have things become swept under the rug, but you just can't do that because like the students' education are like at risk.
Mm-hmm. Well, the spotlight got shown thanks to Coral Ortiz, who has just finished her, as of last night, finished 2 years as the elected student member on the city's Board of Education. And Coral is here today on Dateline New Haven, on WNHH Radio, your home for community radio at 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. What is the single most memorable experience over your 2 years?
Wow, that'd be really hard.
I'll pick one of the most.
I don't know. I don't think there's like a single memorable moment. I think it's more of like the collection of having a lot of things both positively and negatively happen have really shaped my life. And what I want to see in the future out of myself.
Tell me about that. What do you want to see out of yourself in the future now?
I think like no matter what I become as a leader, I've just learned how to properly communicate with people. Like yelling at someone isn't necessarily the best way of getting something done.
Did you used to do that?
No, I never did that, but sometimes I used to think, oh, if the loudest person in the room is the strongest person in the room.
Oh.
And that's not the true, like one of the old board members, Mike Nass, he was so quiet. And like, like, so you wouldn't really expect him to be such a like an effective leader, but like he was the most like effective person. When he said something, it was so insightful, and it was because he was always actively listening. And I think that's something that I've learned, to actively listen.
And give me an example when he said something, when he was listening and other people were yelling, and it made a difference.
I mean, just whether like when they were like conversing about personnel and whether they should, back when the old superintendent here, and whether they should let the personnel be on like a blue sheet or something, or like move them or whatever, he would always, ask questions like, how will this, I just want to know how this will affect children. And I think that question, even though it's so simple, it really brings you back down to earth, back to like, why are we here? We're here to affect children positively. And he would just always say that, and it would really impact our
Very
conversation.
interesting. Now, you came at a fraught time for the city. They were having this new board that suddenly had people getting elected. And we have a mayor who doesn't ride rough over people politically the way her predecessor did, so people will more likely challenge authority, or have more. Some people think that's very good. There's more debate than there used to be. Other people think the meetings became long, shouting at each other's sessions or personal agendas. So you were there as there got to be all these tensions, and people were not nice to each other on the board. They were fighting about stuff instead of getting stuff done. They drove a superintendent out, and you even had group therapy. You guys had a consultant to talk to every day. You had to talk to each other, and you ended up crying at that session because adults were being so awful. What made you cry at that session?
It was just, I think it was like the frustration of like, I think just like having the shock of having, you expect adults to behave and you expect adults to come together, at least for me and my peers. I mean, I think when you're on board of education, you're an adult, you don't necessarily see what happens day to day, but like I was affected by every little decision they made in central office or on the board, and just being frustrated that I was not necessarily, I don't want to say I was behaving. I wasn't like you would expect me and Kimberly to be the ones yelling and screaming and like not necessarily screaming, but just going back and forth all the time. But instead of it being me and Kimberly, being some of the adults in the room, that was really hard. And just kind of this shock and just frustration after months of having to deal with this was pretty hard. Yeah, it was really hard.
Did it get better after that group therapy session, or just for 5 minutes?
No, it didn't really get better until I think Garth left.
What do you think that was all about? So Garth Harries was the superintendent. Some members on the board were determined to get rid of him. They fought about all sorts of stuff and made it happen quick that he leave. And then since he's left, it's been more than a year. It's almost been a year, I mean, and we're still nowhere near getting a new superintendent, so it's no longer that important about who the superintendent is. What did you take from that? Did you think it was a good idea for them to push him out? Were there legitimate criticisms? Was it handled the right way?
I don't really have an opinion on whether it was right or not, just because I don't have like enough information, I feel like, to say whether it was right or not. But I think the way they handled it was not right. Like, there's a difference between privately humiliating someone and publicly humiliating someone. And when you're screaming at someone in front of the New Haven Independent and Register, and every little thing they do, making like a mockery out of it, that's pretty, like, I would not recommend doing that at all. So whether or not they wanted to, like, they want to get rid of him, I think, like, if that was the decision they want to make, just doing it in just a more respectful way would have been a lot.
Are we better off because Garth Harries left?
I don't know. I think we're like more civil now, and we're actually talking about issues.
Now you're talking about the board. What about the students? Remember, it comes down to, are kids better off in New Haven because Garth Harries left?
I have no idea. I honestly kind of, well, for my school, I think it was just a matter of like having the 5 principals, and having one principal is better, but I actually don't see a huge difference, really.
We're talking now about Hill House High School, the second largest general public high school in the city. And one of the big issues for this few years was how that school should be run.
Yeah.
So the Garth Harries, the superintendent, the mayor, Tony Hart, felt that they should build on an idea an old principal Mark Garris has, which was to break the school up into different tracks for kids with different interests and have it be smaller schools within a school. And then they actually went so far as to give each one its own principal and make it a school within the school, and people felt that it wasn't working well. There wasn't communication between the groups, the different principals. You needed someone in charge. People from the old school didn't like the change. They stood up to oppose it. Other people said maybe you could tweak it, but that in fact that's a good idea of the future to have smaller schools within a school. So you're saying, so now we're back to having one principal. How's he doing?
Great. It's just so much better because the staff are on board, and it's just like clearer now. Like, I think the idea of having 3 tracks in one school in terms of like majors is a good idea. I think they went a little too far to have 3 different PTAs, 3 different student councils. That's where it got a little bit too far, and that's where the communication error, like, in my opinion, that's where it just started to get probably not the best.
So is Hill House better for the kids now than it was a year ago?
I would say yes.
And is that simply because there's one person in charge who does a good job?
Yeah. That and I feel like the staff just feel more connected with each other, and the students feel more connected with each other.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So you went to Hill House for 4 years. You come from a pretty highly acclaimed private school before that. You went to Foot School. Then you went to a school with a lot of poverty and a lot of people who weren't reading at grade level. How was your education those 4 years?
My education, I think, honestly, sometimes it was frustrating because of the change. But I've ended up having 5 principals in 4 years, which was really hard. The change from like standardized learning to mastery-based learning. I feel like
what are the difference between the two?
Just like they tried to implement mastery-based learning, but they didn't implement it right. It's like continuing learning the material until you master it above 80%, but the way they were doing it wasn't like necessarily like, now I figured it out afterwards that it wasn't like that wasn't how it's supposed to be done or how it's modeled. So like having the change in like learning and principles was really hard, but I definitely became a better and stronger person because of it. And I learned a lot about what I want to do and what I want to do in the future.
Were the academics good?
Yeah, I'd say for most of my classes, I felt challenged and I had really amazing teachers. Obviously, it was hard when they were constantly changing the learning model in some classes to really reach my full capacity. But I'd say for the majority of my classes, my teachers were great.
So is this back to the standardized versus mastery? I don't feel I totally understand. Standardized learning is when you say, here's what you have to teach everybody. The whole class learns a certain thing
It's
at a
like
time.
the same type of like everybody learns it and then like everybody scores well on the test and they move on. Mastery is more like they teach a material and if you don't get a certain percentage right, they keep on giving you the same material. But then the way it was at my school, it wasn't like fully done mastery. Was more like packets, I'd say, because they didn't really understand how to implement
Did
it.
you have standardized learning when you were at Foot School? Because that doesn't seem like a very standardized place. This is kind of hippie type place.
Foot, like they're not like they don't say they're mastery based learning, but I guess it was more standardized learning, but the teachers would like continue if you didn't know a subject, the teachers would continue teaching you until you mastered it. So I guess even though it was like called standardized learning, like it was like more so a mixture between the two.
So my daughters too, who were quite a bit older than you are, they had gone to a middle school where they had pretty high academics, and then they went to Cross. And my older daughter says the same thing you did. She had some great teachers, some great classes. There was a lot of confusion how the school was run. She didn't get the same kind of academic rigor overall, but that she learned a lot about who she was and how to deal with the world. Is that how you describe your Hill House experience?
Yeah, I guess I would describe it for the most part like that. Just because there were some teachers that like were just phenomenal, and like I'd say most of my teachers were like that.
Examples of who were great teachers.
I'll give some shout outs, Mr. Polishin, Miss Skiba, Miss Forstrom.
What did they teach you? Jack Paulson does civics, right?
Yeah, civics, and Skiba does like social sciences too. And then Miss Forstrom does math. Just some really quality teachers that like really taught me, and I felt like really tried to push me to my fullest capacity. And then obviously there were just some classes where I felt like I could have been challenged a little bit more.
And that's true in any school. What it's like to go to a school where most of the kids are privileged to a school where a lot of the kids are poor, and where a lot of the kids are black. Most of the kids are black and Latino.
It's a lot different. I think the stereotype the stereotype, like when I walk into a room and I would say I was from Hill House versus Foot, like Foot, everyone respected me. Like the second I said I was from Foot, they're like, oh, she's smart, she's probably well behaved. When I would say Hill House, it was like the contrary to that.
Oh my God. Makes you feel bad for the kids at Hill House.
Yeah, well, it's terrible because like, you know, in my opinion, like the kids at Hill House aren't any aren't less intelligent than the kids at Foot. They're just they don't have parents who are doctors, or they like can't afford SAT tutors and things like that. So like you know, they also are going through things at home, whereas like kids at Foot, not that they're not going through things at home, because a lot of them are, but it's just a little bit different, like the privilege. And so I feel like the stereotype around Hill House just isn't true, right? Like it's just not true, and it's just this idea that people have that just isn't true at all. Kids at Hill House are smart, they are capable of learning, they are successful, and I think that's a message that we have to bring out.
And you're bringing that message on Dateline New Haven to WNHH. Your home for community radio 103.5 FM, live senior New Haven Independent. We're talking to one of New Haven's rising stars, Coral Ortiz, who just finished 2 years serving as an elected student member of the New Haven Board of Education. Let's get some specifics. Coral, we talked about guidance counselors. We talked about Hill House. Creed School has very few students, and it has a temporary campus in North Haven. We've been rebuilding almost all their schools in town. And there was a feeling that the money might be running out, and then instead of building a new school for Creed, which is a very, very small school, was it like about 80 kids or a couple hundred kids? Maybe?
I think it's like 200 something.
For 4 grades. So why not combine it with another small school instead of spending the money in these times? And then Creed kids showed up and said, their teacher said, that's terrible, we can't build us a new school. And that got pretty heated on the board, and you spoke up on that. What's your feeling about that?
I think that like my feeling is that Creed at least should be in New Haven. Like I think the reason why they don't have as high enrollment is because they're in another town, and I've like talked to kids. Yeah, they're in North Haven, so you know the busing is difficult. They don't have like the same facility like for gym and things like that. And so when students are applying to these schools, they're not as attractive because they're all the way in another town, even though the community is great. And so I think just bringing them to New Haven would help a lot. I'm not really sure like what the logistics are, but I think the first thing to do is just bring them to New Haven and see, because these kids deserve just as good of an education as like kids from Cross, kids from Hill House, kids from East Rock, like just everywhere. And I feel like they're not getting that attention right now. That's just not fair.
What about the idea about the way democracy works, and now you got to experience it firsthand as a decision maker and a participant in that process? In a democracy, it's so important that a small group that has to just be able to show up and speak out. So the people from Creed very sincerely stood up and said, don't forget about us. Build us a nice school. It might be in the best interest of the majority not to build them a school, but to listen to what they need, but not necessarily have 200 kids get hundreds of millions of dollars spent on a new school building instead of maybe being part of another school building where there are another 200, 300 kids. How do you balance those interests? How do you take seriously what they said, but try to make a decision that's responsible in the interest of the whole city?
I think you have conversations with both parties involved and just talk to both of them about their concerns, talk about what the future could look like with a compromise for both of them, where both parties, I mean, not everyone is going to be happy no matter what you decide, but like making it a compromise enough where the majority is happy from both parties. I think
so. Is it about
really
making
important.
the majority happy? Don't you also have to look at what's, let's say, if 99% of people affected by a decision are not going to be speaking up at a public forum? So let's say the taxpayers of the city or the students in the school system who might not have enough guidance counselors. So you might not have enough money for guidance counselors, and it might make more sense, let's say, maybe they'll get more guidance counselors if Creed is combined with New Light or something like that. How do you take that into effect rather than just trying to make everybody happy?
Obviously, I think the first thing I would just do is have a conversation with both parties, see how the Creed community feels, and see whether or not this could actually work. I know there was one time they were talking about combining Hyde and Hill House, and that just like didn't end up working
out. And their democracy really worked. People saw there were problems about having the same building. They were concerned about the footprint on the land.
Yeah, so just having like communication and then building off of that. I mean, obviously you can't make everyone happy, and you have to do what's in the best interest of just everyone as a whole. So eventually, if not everyone's happy and you have to make that step because we're in a fiscal crisis, I mean, obviously that's what you're going to have to do. But I'd say try to communicate as much as possible.
How about policy-wise, fiscal crisis or not? Does it make sense to have so many smaller schools? Some people would say yes because people need individual learning. Like in New Light, they do miracles. When you have 8 kids in a class of 12 who've been through trauma and otherwise would be in school, we're helping them get through. Like there's very moving ceremony, graduation this week from New Light. In other cases, schools have existed but maybe no longer need to exist for their original reason and can be folded in, but the people are there feel an institutional interest in preserving what they have, not for bad motives. How do you look at that? Should we have fewer schools in New Haven?
I think in general, we should. I think we should have small middle schools and elementary schools and bigger high schools. And I know some people might not agree with that, but I think having 1,000, like I think Hill Central's a really big middle school, is like your foundation of like learning. I mean, when I went to Foot, it was really, really small, and I feel like I was able to find myself because of how small it was and able to tackle on a bigger environment because of how small it was. But it is also important to have small high schools because I know that students feel like they wouldn't be able to handle a huge school like Cross.
So different kids have different needs. Some kids want to be in a bigger high school with more opportunities.
I mean,
different kinds of people. Others need that specialized attention.
Yeah, I prefer a bigger high school just because for me I was able to take advantage of a lot more opportunities, but also I met kids who it's the complete opposite for them. So I think it just depends on you.
Damaris Perez writes in, yes, 3 exclamation points. And Alec Gonzalez say, "You go, Coral." All right, you go, Coral. Coral Ortiz just finished a very successful 2-year term. Member of the Board of Education, and just finished graduating Hills High School. Were you the valedictorian?
Yeah.
So what did you say in speech? Tell me this great speech and you said you missed it.
Yeah, basically I just kind of contradicted the stereotypes that a lot of people in my school had placed on my peers. And I just kind of I put like institutions on blast for that. So
Right.
we'll
Good
see.
job, Coral. So Coral, another issue you were very outspoken on, it was very controversial, there was an effort by a politically prominent preacher in town, Boyce Kimber, comes to meetings and yells at you guys a lot and tries to get business out of the Board of Ed. And one way to try to get business was to start a charter school for boys. And he came on radio, couldn't really explain why it needed to be a charter school as opposed to regular public school, but he was going to get a paid job there. And the mayor supported it, and her staff was making it happen. And then you spoke up. What made you speak up? What did you notice?
First of all, it was a big red flag because I went to a magnet resource fair and I saw them advertising the school when they only proposed it as an idea. And that seems very, very sneaky to me and really upsetting because for someone to propose something as an idea and then advertise to students as if it was happening without...
From the official Board of Ed.
Yeah, from the official Board of Ed is just like unbelievable. And I was just like... literally, my mom went with me because I was like, Mom, I've never been to one of these things. Can you just tag along? I want to see what it's like. And I was like, Mom, is this real? And so then I look online when I go home, and the school they are being advertised on the website. And I was like, there's something really fishy going on here. And I just think, for me, it's never about me versus someone else. I never make it, oh, I don't like you, so I'm going to say something against your school. It's never like that for me. For me, it's like, do we need this school?
So you spoke up, and the tide turned. What about the concept? Did we need that school? Or did it need to be a charter school?
I think we need something for males, especially minority males. I think possibly having like a program attached to a high school that has a lot of these at-risk population that they were looking at, or something like that. Like there are a lot of schools that have the population that they were geared towards. And we just have so many schools. And like, as I mentioned before, Creed isn't even in New Haven, and we're talking about another school.
What about it being a charter school as opposed to a traditional public school?
Yeah, a charter school I don't want to say I see the pros of having choice. Like, I see it, and I see it all the time. I do see, like, sometimes it is frustrating, especially at state board meetings, when we had to reapprove charter schools, just seeing how different they're treated in terms of like personnel, which people have to be certified by the state, like the percentage and things like that, versus like public education. And so that kind of got to me. It also seemed like it, not to just talk about African American males, but Latino males also are struggling, and it felt very geared towards one type of person. That was a problem that I had. But I just fiscally, I don't think we have the resources to build another school, and that was why I had a really big problem with it.
So when you look at it now, why do you think it fell apart once you spoke up? This thing was on a fast track. They were already advertising, as you said, from the official Board of Ed as an official school before you guys had even approved it. You spoke up, and now it's not happening. Why do you think that happened?
I think because it was one of those ideas, and I say this with all respect, that just didn't make sense at all, and no one wanted to point that out. I feel
Why did they want to point it out?
I tried to get not involved politically with individuals in New Haven, but people were coming up to me, how are you able to stand up to that person? And to me, it's just like, people are people, like whether or not you're X person or another person, I'm just going to say what I think. And so for me, it was just a matter of like, does this idea make sense? Is this right? And both of those answers were no.
How did he respond to you?
I don't think he really responded.
So never saying any retribution or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I'm also like a high schooler, so if he did that, well, I just graduated, it would be kind of crazy for him to like come at me, a high schooler. Also, I don't have any political ties to New Haven at all. I just do this and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you will have political ties in the future? Do you see yourself being involved in our city politics?
I do see myself involved, but I have this motto, like, my aunt once told me, or no, my friend once told me, you can't be a politician and be a good person. It's just not possible. I don't consider myself. I would never consider myself a politician. I would consider myself a public servant. Because I don't like the concept of like I like doing things for the people and for the people only. I don't like getting I don't like having biases at all. So I would only do things to help people. Even if you're my friend, I'm sorry, like this is work. It's very different than my personal life, and that's just how I feel. And so if I do get involved in New Haven, I'm trying not to be as I don't want to be political.
Do you want to be involved in New Haven campaigns at all, or do you want to run for office yourself one day?
I could see myself running for office. In terms of campaigning, as of right now, I just haven't. Like some people have reached out to me, and I just really want to stay out of it in general because I do want that normal college experience. I feel like in high school I didn't really get that.
When you were in high school, was it also a normal college experience when you were a member of the Board of Ed? So you go to Board of Ed night, and you'd have influence over what would happen to the people who run your school.
Mm-hmm.
The next day you would see principals, teachers, administrators.
Mm-hmm.
Did they treat you differently or react to you in any way because they knew you had some power over them?
I feel like naturally, like, not, I don't think on purpose, but like sometimes if I had a problem with my schedule, for example, versus another kid, I feel like sometimes they would attend to me first just because, like, not that they were scared, but I felt like sometimes it was just like, oh, she does all of these things for our school, so I really need to make sure that she, like her schedule gets on, or things like if I had a problem with the principal, I just had so much more access to the principal, or like to the superintendent, I had so much more access, so I feel like sometimes I was...
But like in class, like did they catch you smoking in the bathroom and said, oh, well, she's on the board, so you can't...
No, I don't think that ever happened. Like, I don't think first of all, I'd never do that, and also, I don't think that ever happened.
Did you ever get a little rude to one of your teachers? Because did you feel like maybe you had to learn to be a little humbler? Like now that you were on the Board of Ed, did you sometimes feel like you didn't have to be less respectful to the teachers?
No, I feel like if anything I've have more respect for my teachers because it's like I see what they have to do all the time and I see all the data they have to do and I understand it a lot better. So I feel like I'm much more pro teacher than I was before.
So you weren't dealing drugs and having fights in the backyard?
Yeah, sadly not. I know this would make a juicy story, but
it would be. That'd be pretty good. But no, I like this story, and Daniel Quintero does too. He writes in, "This is awesome, Coral," and also 3 exclamation point. That seems to be the number you're getting today. So now you're going to Yale University. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. You got into 4 colleges, was it? Or 4?
4 Ivies. So I got into Harvard, Penn, Brown, and Yale.
Wow. So you got into Harvard, Penn, Brown, and Yale. So obviously Hillhouse was proud of that.
Yeah.
Your student got into all those colleges. Why did you choose Yale? A lot of kids would feel like Harvard's a better school, or it's time for me to get out of New Haven.
Well, actually, I did kind of want to branch out of New Haven just because I feel like it's healthy, just like learning other communities and stuff like that. For me, I just felt like Yale really encompassed like the academics that I wanted, like, well, also the social life that I wanted as well, because like it's a mixture of like Harvard and Brown in like one school to me.
Tell me about that. What does that mean?
Like
how's it a mixture of Harvard and Brown?
I feel like it, like, you know, Harvard. I loved Harvard's academics and like their JFK School of Government. Like I loved it, and then I loved Brown's just social feel. They're very artsy. I go to ECA, so I'm pretty artsy as well.
What do you do at ECA?
At theater. So I felt like Yale really had like the social and like friendly environment. That Brown had, while also having like really amazing. Well, I'm going on the poli-sci track, so really amazing like poli-sci professors and opportunities. So at Yale. So
who got your eye there?
What's his name? He was Secretary of State.
John Kerry.
Yeah, he's gonna be there, and just notable people have really come out of Yale.
I love the poli-sci department at Yale.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah. And so I did a lot of research on that, and Yale came up as like one of the best schools for that. So,
is it gonna be weird going to college in the town that you grew up in and that your parents are living a mile away from?
I mean, I think everyone I've talked to who goes to Yale who's from New Haven says it's weird at first, but they say it's like being at Yale is kind of you're in a different world.
It is. It's like a bubble.
Yeah.
It's its own planet.
Yeah, so I'm kind of excited for that. And, you know, I'm going to be around with people who are from everywhere, so it's going to be exciting.
Coral Ortiz, do you have any parting advice to your fellow Board of Education members?
Just I guess always put kids first, and make sure that you're modeling the behavior that you'd want to see kids behave in the classroom. Like,
Mhm.
so always model great behavior, I guess, and just always put the kids first. They say like it's hard to make decisions, but I actually don't think it's as hard as some people think. I think once you put kids first, it becomes a lot easier.
And any advice to your successors, Jacob Spell and Michaela Dawson?
Advocate your voice. Don't be intimidated by adults. I mean, I kind of had to get over it. I had to get over the feeling of intimidation and just advocate. Just say what you believe in. And I mean, worst case scenario, there really isn't worst case scenario. You're a high schooler, so.
How did you get over your being intimidated by the adults?
I came to a point where I knew that what I believed in was stronger than my fear of offending someone or the adults in the room. So once I got over that fear, I knew that I was ready to advocate for myself.
And boy, did you do a great job at it. Coral Ortiz, it's been such a pleasure having you on Dateline New Haven today. I just want to congratulate you on a fantastic 2 years you just spent as a member of the Board of Education, elected by your fellow students. Do you think student members should be allowed to vote?
I don't know.
Able to cast votes?
I actually have no idea.
Okay.
It's a hard one.
Well, you did a great job, and the whole city's proud of you. And you showed the adults how to behave, and you were able to unite the warring factions of Board Ed to praise you last night. So we wish you the best of luck at Yale. We know we're going to be hearing so much from you as you go forward. You're just a rising star, and we're going to be so proud of all that you accomplished.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Thanks for the folks who wrote in with all the exclamation points. And thanks to Young New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Book your flight with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. Nice job.
You.
You really did do a great job on the board. Everybody loved you. So when you got the rest of today?
Probably just gonna go to the movies with my friends. I'm trying to catch up on 2 years of not having a social life because I was so busy with the board.
What movie you seen?
I have no clue.
Well, thanks so much, Coral. Great job.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Stay
Should I
in
cut
touch.
this over or just
I'll take
Thank you.
it. Okay. I just let them know we're done so they can kill the Facebook feed. Can you guys kill the Facebook? I think so. Or actually, I should do it. So how do I do it?
Yeah, turn on.
Or you should turn on something before you do it? Okay, now I want to...
Yeah, go down. Go all the way down. See the black circle? Go all the way down. Go all the way down. Go all the way down. See it? Black circle. Right there. Click on it. Nope.
How do you do it?
So once you're on it, just tap on it.
Okay, so now it's done?
Then you stop streaming. See it? Nope, you lost the
Yeah, how do I lose that?
because it went to the other screen. So you gotta bring it back.